On the opposition, we have Isoka Fan Club. Motion is second. I call upon Prime Minister to start this debate. Here.
Mr. Speaker, the fundamental importance of religion is the fact that anyone can access it, whether you're poor, whether you're rich, whether you're in the middle class. Your importance of religion and how you matter in religion never matters, no matter what kind of price tag it is. We think that by adding a capitalistic incentive, but furthermore by adding a capitalistic system in religion, that takes away that nuance and makes religion an even more narrow space, and it makes people feel as though their faith in general has a price tag. We think that degrades religion. We think that takes away from the true meaning of religion. We're happy to stand on the government side. So we're going to talk to you about three main things today from opposition on government side. First of all, we're going to talk to you about the importance of religion, but furthermore, we're going to highlight the uniqueness of the religion and how anyone can access it. Secondly, we're going to talk about how adding money takes away from the true meaning of Christianity. But furthermore, the value of religion that you have is made on a prerequisite of your financial capacity and how that's harmful. Lastly, we're going to talk about how this makes people irrational, causes people to spend lots of money, which we are completely against. Let's go on first of all to this model opposition side, government side today, right? Because we first of all want to clear up what we're talking about with the capitalistic incentives. What kind of things are currently happening right now? It's the fact that if you take a trip to Jerusalem, you're a better Christian than other Christians because you can have that money and take that trip. It's the idea that when you go to the Vatican Church, they sell you tons of crosses and rosaries made of gold and made of jewels, and say that if you use these kinds of special crosses, you are a better Christian than regular Christians. That's already happening in the Vatican in the status quo. That's nothing new, right? But furthermore, if you buy more Christian things, you are a better Christian. You have more faith in that religion. That spending money on a god actually makes you a better Christian in general. We think that is what the capitalistic system of the Vatican Church and the Christian Church is doing right now, and we think that's harmful. But furthermore, let's clear up the stance coming from government side today, because we think that we understand the fact that religion sometimes needs money, right? So we think it's okay to receive donations. We think it's okay to receive money if it's on that free will, right? But we think that what we're against right now is the capitalistic system that religion has gone into, and the capitalist system in general that currently infuriates and fails religion, and we think that is harmful. So our stance today from all government side to clear that up is the fact that money makes us fact that you have a financial ground as to what kind of person you are in religion, and we think that is harmful. Let's go on first of all to the importance of religion, because we think the importance of religion has many importances, right? Due to the fact that it fills up so many people's lives. We think it provides you with comfort. It provides you with personal salvation. It gives you guidance in life, but furthermore, it gives you a connection in the church, a connection in that church. We think that is the ultimate characteristics of religion. But let's go on to the uniqueness of religion, right? We think the reason that we gave it tax exemptions, the reason that we promote religion so much and give it so much power, is due to the fact that anyone can access it. Anyone, no matter what class you're in, no matter what richness you have, you can always access religion. We think that means the fact that even if you're poor or even if you're rich, you can always go into a church and you can always find personal salvation. You can always find a guidance from your local church and from the priest. But furthermore, we think that religions in general target poor people, right? They go to slums, they go to, for example, shelters, they go to ghettos, and they say the fact that we can salvate you. Even if you don't have money, you can still have God. Even if you don't have money, and even if you don't have a house, even if you don't have any kind of anything, your God will always be there for you. Being that for that reason, religion in itself also targets poor people and ensures the fact that any group of people, no matter what they can do this. But furthermore, we think the connection within the church community in itself is also built on your faith of God, right? It's connected on whether or not that person in itself who's sitting next to you also loves God. And we think that is the extreme importance of religion. The access is always guaranteed. And that's the reason why we never limit the freedom of religion in a private sphere. It's due to the fact that anyone can access it and anyone can go into it. But furthermore, how does adding money take away from this? First of all, we think that takes away the true meaning of Christianity. What's the true meaning of Christianity? Focusing on God, bettering yourself, having that connection with God that stays with you no matter what. We think that by adding money, for example, that true premise that is there is taken away. We think that first of all, it causes people to think that even if you give money, then you already connected with God in some way, right? For example, if I'm a billionaire and I donate tons to a church, I think that just because I donate that money, I have that connection with God. That's not the true premise of Christianity, and we think that that relation with God is taken away because of that. But secondly, we think that makes a financial capacity as a prerequisite to make you a Christian. So yes, you can access Christianity if you don't have money, if you are poor. But what currently is happening in the Vatican Church is the fact that if you have more money, if you can pay more for a better rosary or a better cross in some way into the Vatican, you are deemed as a better Christian. You are deemed by the church as a better Christian. You're seen as a church community as a better Christian, and we think that's harmful, right? Why is that? It's because first of all, the amount of money you have determines how faithful you are. But furthermore, it's against the fundamental reason that we gave you, that anyone can access it, right? Anyone can deem themselves as a good Christian, and anyone can have that avenue of comfort. I mean, that avenue of comfort is actually currently put down right now due to the fact that people have to put a price on it. No, thank you. Secondly, how this puts a price on faith, right? We think that first of all, it's first two reasons. First of all, we think it's degrading that first of all, people have to restrict the amount of faith they have due to the amount of money they have, right? We think that due to the fact that you say that if you have more money, if you spend more, you are seen as more faithful. We think that it's essentially putting a price on faith. We think that first of all, it's degrading the whole premise of faith. But secondly, in a moment, it's saying the fact that there's a value on faith, meaning that if you pay $10 for your faith, if you pay $10 for another item, you can actually put a price on that faith, and we think that's harmful.
Okay, so then why are you supporting religious donations on your house?
Because that's not the system of this, right? What you're doing right now is a system of feeding into the money, and we think that is a completely different line. Let's go on to secondly. We think this causes many people to act irrationally spend, right? Religion in itself already has an addictive nature to it. It has an essential nature, and furthermore, it's easy to manipulate people. Why is that? It's based on intangible relationships. Your relationship with God is not tangible. You cannot see God. You have to go to church to do that. It's based on intangible future, right? Like heaven. There's a reason why in the Middle Ages, people paid tons of money to have a token to heaven, because it's easy to exploit these people. It's easy to use that money, and we think that's against religion, because what religion is for personal salvation, not for taking your finances and for taking your money and lowering your quality of life in that way. At the end of the day, this takes away from the true meaning of religion. It furthermore hurts people within religion. It's not good for anyone within religion. We're happy to stand on proposition.
Thank you, Mark. Now I will call leader of opposition to start your case.
as if so their governance cases they are based on the assumption that as if that the many law believers forced to pay money to the Vatican, forced to pay money to the churches, unless if they want to believe in the Christianity. But the articulated version of capitalization is not congruent with what we support on the opposition. And rather we say that because of the capitalism, the capitalization, which enable the church to be more moderate, more inclusive, and it enabled for even non-believers to go into and participate and get religious experiences on our paradigm. So we oppose this motion. So as a leader of opposition, firstly I'm going to talk about what the capitalization means in our paradigm. And secondly, I'm going to talk about why it is because of this capitalization that many people can more easily opt into the religious experiences, and church can be moderate and inclusive. And thirdly, I'm going to talk about why it is beneficial for the churches, why it's beneficial for or other people on the ground. So before that, several points to rebuttal. As I have said in my introduction, their articulated version of capitalization is actually going it's actually to some extent unrealistic, because I cannot understand why the churches, their mission is to save the poor, to save the people on the ground, have to force poor people to pay their money to the extent that they cannot secure their life, or they have to pay to the extent they cannot afford. And I don't think that is realistic. Even if that is to some extent correct, that we don't deny that, we don't deny that those who pay money to the Vatican is actually the better religion people. They can be regarded as better religion people, but it's only one-sided, right? Because there's many other people who can be regarded as better religious believers if they do voluntary activities, and if they go misa every Sunday. And if they are rich, you can contribute to the Vatican by paying money, but it's only one of the ways you can do, and so they're actually that even if it's so we don't think it's so problematic in our paradigm. So moving on to my issue. Actually, we think that capitalization means giving a kind of services to the people in return by getting money. No, thank you. And actually, before the capitalization of this capitalization, actually the holy religious experiences is restricted to the strict believers, or the believers who believe in from their birth, right? And historically, church restricted the initiations for only strict believers, or those limited people. But we think that by giving capitalization, by giving services on more moderate and inclusive services, we support those sort of capitalization. And why? Because I'm moving on to the second issue. Why? Because of the capitalization that churches can be more inclusive. Because as I have said, that churches have rigorous images, strict images, and give people those sort of feelings that if you are not so strict, and if you're not so strict, you cannot be permitted to go into there. And people on the ground hesitate to go into the religious places if they haven't read scripture before that in the past. No, thank you. But by giving the services such as tours in the holy places, or such as tours in the initiation in the churches, that because of this, that priests because of this, that the priests in the church have incentive to offer more inclusive services, not so strict people can go and take part in, because they are actually in our paradigm they are getting money in return, and so their services, the quality of the services, or actually so they have incentive to lower the bar for those non-believers or other people to take part in the religious experiences, which is thought to be strict or thought to be limited. And by what we support is that the priests use easier words that the non-believers can understand, and by giving money. And actually so why this is good for the churches and believers? No, thank you. And because of this, that people on the ground have first contact to the churches, first contact to the religious experiences, because now the churches offer more casual holy experiences and more moderate and easy, approachable holy experiences. And actually, because that the target of this capitalization can be the people who are not so strictly believers and non-believers, and we think that this capitalization is completely compatible with traditional initiation or traditional experiences, because if you are for those strict believers, the churches also can offer the traditional version of initiation, traditional version of experiences. And why this is so beneficial for the churches, because churches have incentive to work into the society which is changing right now, and more bodies, which the churches have to consider the more bodies, not only the strict believers, but also the people who don't have so much incentive to believe on the ground. And this give them incentive to change themselves to be more inclusive, and not only that, they can get money which can secure the sustainability in the churches. So we oppose.
Thank you, Max. Now I call upon Deputy Prime Minister to extend your speech.
So what they want to protect from their side of the house is the ability of a church to gain new believers, the ability of a church to increase its credibility within society, to increase the number of believers that it has. The question of this debate then is that benefit of increasing a church worth the cost of reducing the actual concept of religion itself, the actual meaning of religion itself? And that's the question that we see in this debate, right? We think that even if you were to take that best case scenario and admit the fact that maybe if you have more money, and maybe you have more commercialization, maybe you have more reach in society to newer people who are not believers, who the church is not accountable to yet, we still think that that's not a good enough benefit to override the massive harms that comes to the meaning of religion itself, the degradation of religion itself, and the way it harms the essential concept of religion in itself. So that's the framing that you need to see this debate through. So a couple of reviews going into that case before moving on, right? Firstly, they said that the church doesn't necessarily force people to buy. Well, to an extent, it's true. It's true that the priest doesn't go into the misa and say, you need to buy this book. They don't do that. They don't say, you need to buy this cross, right? They don't do that. But at the end of the day, it's all about perception. It's all about how the believers see it, and it's all about how the believers feel, right? When you have a church bringing out lots of products, and when you see other people within that church buying these products and wearing crosses and so on, obviously you're going to feel, maybe I need to do that as well. Or you're also going to be feeling, maybe that is a show that a person wearing a ring, for example, shows that that person has that intimacy with God to that extent. Maybe I might need to go to that extent as well to show to the other people that I'm also as faithful as the others within that context, right? Therefore, it's not about whether the church actually forces them, but it's about whether the church, even in an unconscious level, forces these people to abide by those buying and the consumption itself, and we think it does, right? Because objectively seeing, and even from the perception of these believers, even though connection with the God should be made through the belief itself, how strongly you feel towards religion and the faith itself, the moment you add these monetary incentives, it also becomes about how much you can show that faith, how much people can see that faith on an objective level, and how much people can believe that you actually believe in the God itself, right? That's the review that you need to consider, because even if churches don't actively force them, the existence of these capitalism within religion itself is harmful, and that's something which unconsciously forces these people, and that's problematic. But then they went on to say that it's something that they're protecting something of which is giving services to the people without actually explaining what those really are, right? If they're really talking about ways to help people, like in order to gain new followers, people can already opt in through Bibles, or they can still go to church. The church isn't like shut out, right, on a Sunday. They don't say you cannot only come in if you're a Christian. It's open to anyone who are willing to associate themselves with that Christianity or with that religion in itself. So if people have that feeling of wanting to go in, they can still go. But moreover, in a European context, and probably in an American context as well, you have in classes, you have religious studies where people are taught these religions from an early age. Therefore, you still have that connection with religion to start with. We don't necessarily think that the existence of these tours to like the Vatican City is not really necessary. But moreover, it's rather counterproductive, because it's more like the church saying these are things that are necessary in order for you to be Christian. Christianity is about going to the Vatican. Christianity is about going on these tours, and these cathedrals are what represents Christianity. The moment the church is the one actively sending those messages out, it also is sending out the message that in order to be a true Christian, in order to really be abiding by the signification of what actually being a Christian means, you need to do these stuff as well. And that's where we see the problem coming in. Because for rich Christians, maybe it's not problematic. Maybe they can just go on on Expedia, buy a flight ticket to Vatican and enjoy spaghetti, pasta, and the spiritual experience as well. But for the poor people, they can't even have that experience. They don't even probably have a computer to start with to buy flight tickets, so therefore they miss out on that and all the lovely food that exists in Italy as well, right? That's the problem that we see. The moment you bring in monetary incentives to religion, you also create money as being a prerequisite for you being able to believe in religion to a certain extent. And when it's the church saying, these are things that signify being Christian, and yet these are things that cost a lot of money, but at the same time the church is being the one who are actively pursuing poor people in order to join them with the message that you can be a Christian, God will be with you regardless of where you are, then we think that's a huge contradiction within the stance of the Christian church in itself, right? But moreover, we don't necessarily think that just by having capitalism within Christianity, that's the only reason why priests use easy words and easy to understand language, because you also need to understand that illiterate believers do exist as well, people who can't write and read and so on. So therefore, when you consider the fact that there's a huge difference within the grade of believers, I guess, you also need to understand that the priests have that incentive willingly to make sure that they are the ones using easy words, and also to make sure that they're fulfilling their role as priests by being able to teach everyone and preach to everyone with easy words that they're being understood. So we don't necessarily think that they gave us any reason why capitalism in itself is uniquely necessary for any of their benefits to come up. Yeah.
Francis, that one of the group of Christianity whose virtue is having nothing, no payment to the church. Why your monetary incentive mechanism is the majority case?
Yeah, you just said it yourself, it's one sect of that church. We're opposing any of those sects that exist in Christianity if you have a capitalistic incentive. And this is where we also need to clarify a bit, right? Because they seem to think that we have a contradiction regarding donation. We don't have a contradiction. Because in terms of capitalist the system itself, the problem we see is that you have that perception that you feel the necessity to buy, you feel the necessity to purchase, and that's what we oppose. Donation is completely different because it's the inner incentive to give to church, to give to the religion itself, and that's a clear distinction on a principle level. But moreover, at the end of the day, what you also need to recognize in this debate, and what hasn't really been tackled by that side of the house, is the concept of religion itself. What is religion, and what does it exist, and who does it exist for? It exists for every single person within society, regardless of how rich they are, regardless of any of their social capital or financial capital or any capital that they have, right? It's for everyone. The moment you enter money into it, the moment you say money is important, you make that a prerequisite that goes against the fundamental concept, but moreover, you're putting a price on people's faith. You're saying your faith is only worth this much amount of money because you only have that cross and not the golden cross. I think these are things which become problematic, and for those reasons, I think religion should stay as a religion.
Thank you very much. Now I call upon deputy leader of opposition to extend your case. Be here.
Today's government bench used tons of times the word capitalism, but we believe that they never talked about capitalism itself. Well, if you have to pay, if the matter is about like paying more or not, you can also do that by donation. This is nothing to do with like capitalism itself. The core uniqueness of the capitalism is it provides the churches the financial incentive to actively make an access to people, new potential believers. We believe that this is uniquely necessary to fulfill the role of the religion, so we believe we strongly stand on the side of the opposition. So I'm going to talk about three things in this debate. The first one is this capitalism like really against the true meaning of Christianity or not? Secondly, I'm going to talk about how this capitalism will give a unique gateway to new potential believers and why this is good for the religion. Thirdly, I'm going to talk about how this is going to increase the financial capability of the churches and how we can reach to new people, like people living in rural side and so forth. So let me explain one by one. Firstly, let's talk about whether it's really against the true meaning of Christianity or not. So what the government bench told us is this. Okay, if you pay more, you feel a closer relationship with the gods, so the poor people will feel inferior on this, providing example of the Vatican's. But Mr. Speaker, first of all, the first point is that we do not see any difference between donation in this point. Also, the donation is it's a system, something like gathers money from the believers. So you open the opportunities for people to pay more, and rich people are actually paying those kind of donations, and they are still supporting donation itself, right? So if they are consistent with their stand, they have to ban the donation itself as well, right? We need to hear the answer from Tommy. Second of all, is this really going to give additional grade to people pay a lot or not? We believe so. Yuki told us about it's all about perception. It's going to because other people are paying, you will also feel forced to pay a lot. But Mr. Speaker, I have two rebuttals on this. We believe this is not true. First of all, again. Those kind of additional paying of the money is not something written in the Bible, not something taught in the churches every day. So this is why, for example, even the poor people, they often hear that even if you are not rich, if you live under the teaching of the God, you are still being salvated. This is the core of the Christianity, right? So this is why the poor people do not feel those kind of perception. The second one is about who are the target of this capitalism? It's not the core believers, right? It's more like the casual tourists or maybe the casual believers who join those kind of mega churches. So this is why this is why we never see rich people buying tons of those crosses every single day to feel the connection with God, right? It's the tourists. So when you see the tourists, you do not feel inferiority in terms of the connection with God because they are tourists and not the believer themselves, the core beliefs, right? So this is why we do not think that such kind of additional inferiority system is not likely to happen. Go.
Okay. Tourism is just one example of capitalization. Tell me the reason why the people who are able to buy golden cross as opposed to regular cross, they can be a better believer, although he might be less faithful than the poor believers.
Okay, first of all, to clarify, those kind of crosses are not the only thing, in the capitalism. There are other things I will explain in my second point. So second point, I'm going to explain about how this is going to be a unique gateway to new potential believers. Okay, we believe that we are with the government bench. What we share is the core goal of the religion. Because like we share the goal that okay, the role of the religion is to provide a mental relief or the salvation to the people. Like for example, to the poor people, you still can feel that you if you believe in God, like God is always beside you and you're being salvated. And we also share that accessibility to many people is important because now like more people will be salvated. So this is the role of the religion, and we believe that capitalism is very much consistent with those kind of beliefs. Why is this? So let's explain why this is the best and easy way for those like new potential believers. So the uniqueness of the capitalism is, so in order to make money, you have to reserve better services, right? Because like if you are not raising money, that's only a routine. That's your duty in this job. So even if you hold some kind of tourism, you do not have an active incentive to increase the quality. Provide a like translating system, or maybe a lot of showy pictures to attract like newcomers and so forth. But Mr. Speaker, if you introduce capitalism in order to raise money and collect money, you have to improve the quality. So this is why you introduce new translators or very clean whole and also good guidebooks and so forth. So what is going to? So there are a lot of flexible and people like seeking for like personal salvation, right? So like non-believers, or maybe we see some people, Muslim people, like turning into Christianity and so forth. So they say that like only education is not, but we do not think so. Why is this? Because like even if you take an education, like you do not like so it's only a systematic way to understand about the history of this. But by visiting those kind of like mega churches or maybe sacred places and experience like the pray or maybe or like directly hear the myths or the histories through the translator inside those kind of environments. So this will be the first contact for you to get interested in like joining those kind of religion and feel relief. So this is why even if you are seeking for the salvation, more people are interested in this and believe in this and get satisfied, like get comfortable in this place. So this is why this is consistent with potential believers. So thirdly, let's talk about financial capability. We believe that like the donation itself is totally not enough to reach to like newcomers. Why is this? Because you have to pay for like daily activities like providing food or providing salaries to employees or maintaining churches every day. So you do not have like room to reach to the rural areas to establish new churches and make a teach to the new rural areas. But by like being in capitalism, you can raise a lot of money. This is a consensus between the government, and this is why you can bring a chance to the rural areas people to believe in this God. We believe for the sake of the true meaning of the Christianity, we believe capitalism is totally consistent.
Thank you very much. Now I call upon government week.
Mr. Chair, two things from the government bill. Firstly, for the sake of whether or not for the sake of inclusivity, the system of capitalism is necessary. And secondly, I'm going to discuss all the things we provided to you from the government side about how the capitalization contradicts the principle and the core of religion as it stands. So first of all, let's talk about whether or not the argument of the opposition, like simply put, the inclusivity, whether or not for its sake the capitalization is necessary. Now they talked about how, Mr. Speaker, inclusivity is important. We agree to some extent, but Mr. Speaker, what they conveniently ignore that they are being exclusive rather in the status quo due to the capitalization. Because what we exactly told you is that there is a high hurdle for the poor people to join the church in the first place, and furthermore be a serious believer, Mr. Speaker, because of all the reason we provided to you, Mr. Speaker, for the level because there is a strong perception within the specific congregation or sect that to be a good believer or to be a believer in the first place, you have to be able to afford to to buy certain books, Mr. Speaker, or to join, for example, the like activities, like for example, toward the Jerusalem. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we think this is creating the hurdle for the poor people because they feel that they are lesser. They feel that they are not deserving to be a believer, or they are not deserving to be a good believer, and therefore they are being exclusive in the status quo, and therefore they have to prove why their form of, like, even if they can be inclusive, although we don't think so, like why their form of inclusivity is better than like the consequence of excluding the poor people due to the capitalization. We don't think they have done because they only focused upon the convenient part of their capitalization, which is that they might be inclusive to, for example, people living in the rural areas and so on and so forth. Now, furthermore, the response we got from them is that by engaging in some other voluntary activities without being able to pay money, they can be a good believer. But what Yuki told you is that there is a strong perception within their congregation. Now, Dialogue said, for example, paying money is not written in the Bible, and therefore it's not something monetary. But obviously, Mr. Speaker, you have to consider the importance or the strength of the bond, Mr. Speaker, within a specific congregation. Because let's look at the activities of the believers. For example, they go to church every single Sunday, and they receive preaching from a specific priest they believe in. They are following, for example, the last decade or so, and they have a strong tie among the congregation, and they talk about, for example, the will of the God with the other members of a specific congregation, and they strengthen and reinforce that belief. And then, if you look at this kind of structure of the religion or specific congregation, Mr. Speaker, the bond within the congregation is, Mr. Speaker, almost as important as what is literally written in the Bible. And therefore, just by saying that, paying money is not written in the Bible, does not refute the argument, because obviously there is a perception which almost forces people to pay the money, or they feel that they are not worthy as a believer, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, we prove to you how they are being exclusive, they are excluding the poor people, which contradicts the principle of religion to be open to everyone, including the poor, including the minority. But furthermore, in addition to that, Yuki has told you how the capitalization is not necessary, Mr. Speaker, to be inclusive, because he spent lots of time talking about how religion has incentive to be open, religion has, for example, class in school, and furthermore, there is incentive to use easy words because of the existence of believers who are not literate, Mr. Speaker. But furthermore, we say further that our way of inclusivity is better than their way of inclusivity, Mr. Speaker, because it is evident when Thomas used the term like casual believer, Mr. Speaker. Now, what we have to discuss is whether or not it is really good to include those casual believers to the church, Mr. Speaker, because the nature of the religion is a personal commitment, Mr. Speaker. Now, in return for the personal commitment, you can be saved by the religion in the moments of trial or in the moments of solitude, Mr. Speaker. That's the reason why the believers go to church every single Sunday morning, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, just by saying that I'm a believer without following, for example, a prayer, without following, for example, custom of going to church every Sunday morning, do you really think such people who just call themselves believer deserve to be saved or deserve to be a believer, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker. Rather, by including those every single casual believer, just to join the tour but do not practice the religion in a serious manner, Mr. Speaker, religion degrades itself because now it becomes a pop label rather than or status symbol, or for example, recreation, rather than the personal commitment it truly is, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, what I proved to you just now is that, Mr. Speaker, their way of inclusivity is rather not desirable, and therefore inclusivity is not unique. Furthermore, their way of inclusivity is bad because it excludes poor people. Furthermore, thirdly, their way of exclusivity is rather not contradicts the principle of religion, which requires the personal commitment, and therefore their argument does not stand, all in all. Furthermore, Thomas talked about translation and so forth, but look at, for example, Francisco Xavier, who came to Japan, I guess, in the 16th century or something, Mr. Speaker. Before the appearance of Megacharch and so on, Mr. Speaker, the religion was, Christianity was able to spread, Mr. Speaker, across the ethnic divide, across the national border, and therefore this is a clear evidence which, or even to Africa, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, the history proves his argument is not true. The capitalization is not necessary. I'll take your point.
So even if you're casual believers, you still does not actively go against the role of the Christianity, and you still feel the salvation from the God. How can you deny the right for those casual believers to believe in this God?
Okay, I'm not a believer, but I'm not going for example, I do not offend the God, or I do not actively go against, for example, what is written in the rule of the religion. But still, since I'm not, for example, like following the custom of the religion, since I'm not following the practice of the religion, probably I'm not deserving as a believer. I'm just non-believer, and therefore that's the thing. You have to have a personal commitment. That's only like reasonable. So moving on to my second issue, which is about what's the harm of the capitalization. Donation is clearly different, Mr. Speaker, because it is not systematically or universally requiring the members of the congregation to, for example, pay money to buy books, Mr. Speaker. It is just done by the rich people who can afford to pay donation. Therefore, all the argument we talked about does not apply to donation, Mr. Speaker. Donation is not prerequisite to join the church because like religion is open, without the capitalization, the religion is open to the poor. Therefore, it is not prerequisite, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, all the argument we provided to you is not applicable to donation, and that's the reason why, Mr. Speaker, there's a difference. But furthermore, exactly what we told you is that, Mr. Speaker, the poor people excluded because tourism itself is expensive because, for example, holy place in Jerusalem, obviously, Mr. Speaker, that is something exclusive for the expensive for example, American believers. And furthermore, buying golden cross, those things are not affordable to the poor people. But second of all, we talked about how the religion puts the price tag. Now think about, for example, if you can join the tour on, for example, $10,000, Mr. Speaker, that is almost tantamount to saying that your belief is equivalent to, for example, like cars, which cost as much, for example, $10,000, and therefore, given that the religion is something unique, in the moments of trial, you can be saved by the religion. Therefore, religion has to be invaluable. Religion should not be equated with, for example, commodities, Mr. Speaker, and that is the reason why, as Taika told you in her second argument, putting the price tag on the religion, saying the religion is not something invaluably important, is pernicious for the believers, Mr. Speaker, belief, and therefore for those plural reasons, we say their capitalization is contradictory to the principal religion, and therefore we propose.
Max, now I call upon opposition brief.
Mr. Speaker, Komatsu-san is very rich, but he is also very busy. And we think it's really wrong when the church excludes him just because he doesn't have the time to go to church every Sunday, just because he's too busy to do that, but he does have the money and he can contribute in a unique way. We think, Mr. Speaker, that religion is becoming more and more pluralistic, and we think that on our side of the house, we are able to create a unique value that is extremely important to an extremely important set of people, and that is why we think this motion falls. So I'm going to answer 3 questions in my speech. Firstly, is the value of religion really degraded? In other words, is there really going to be a hierarchy of values that they really talk about, and how are the poor going to be affected? Second question, is it beneficial for the people who buy? Because they seem to characterize these people as irrational. I'm going to cut down that assumption. Thirdly, what's the net outcome of this policy? And considering from a more utilitarian sort of perspective, what is really beneficial from the society as a whole? So first question about is the value of religion really degraded? Because we have to recognize that the value of religion is not only measured in monetary terms. Because even in their paradigm, there is still religious values, for example, like abstinence, that is directly against these sort of capitalistic values. That means that there are various narratives that coexist with each other, and even in their paradigm. And we think that because there is a directly counter narrative to this sort of capitalistic society, we think that is something that is a unique identity that can also exist. And this is extremely important, and we have to consider in this very debate for a various number of reasons. Firstly, they talked about, look, there's a bond between people, and we have to really, and these people are sort of feeling social pressure, and etc. The problem was this, is that they thought that the only sort of values that existed in their paradigm were the sort of values that valued this money, the people who bought these sort of crosses. But the problem is, those are not the only sort of people that exist. There are still people who don't buy the crosses, but might go to church every day, or might, for example, do abstinence, or all sorts of other things that can become godlike, that have religious values, without actually having to buy those crosses. And that means that there's also a community that might not only not buy the crosses, but might actually be against buying the crosses. Those people might say that, look, spending money just to gain religious value is not something good. But the existence of that exact narrative means that there are the people who are against this sort of things can play into that exact narrative. We think that there's already a community there. We didn't see the unique necessity or the unique problem that exists on the earth of the house. Second of all, Furthermore, they only talked about the special crosses, etc. And they totally neglected our characterization about, for example, the tours which people go to. These people are only talking about a narrow set of services which we don't think are only going to support the entire motion. But furthermore, we think that their arguments are extremely wrong on several levels. They told us, look, by putting a price tag on value, we're saying that people who don't have much money are not worth as much as people who can spend money. The problem with this is, first of all, it totally neglects the other values, but furthermore, we think that's actually Furthermore, it neglects the fact that there are other values, which I already elaborated on. But furthermore, we think that it's actually beneficial that people who are rich can actually spend money to gain religious value. Because we think there's a uniqueness, we think there's a uniqueness, for example, for people who need to play into that narrative, for people who do have money but don't have time. We think that those people are also deserving of a salvation, because we think they agreed with us that, look, religion should be inclusive. All they said to this was, look, those people don't really deserve it, because religion has to have, because you have to have a certain degree of commitment in order to gain this. We don't really see the necessity of having effort as a prerequisite in this very circumstance, because we think that those people are equally deserving, and because religion is something that works to maximize the salvation of the world, we think that it's far better when they are able to include a set of people who weren't necessarily able to commit, but are able to spend money and contribute in their own unique way. We never saw why that was not a deserving thing that we should reward from the perspective of religion. Before I move on, yes?
You talk about these other narratives existing, the anti-capitalistic narrative. But why would anyone believe this narrative if it's the church itself being capitalistic?
Here.
Look, the church itself is not only capitalistic, and there are various churches in the world, so not all churches are capitalistic. When you never told us why the only narrative that exists in your paradigm is this capitalistic society, that was the burden of proof on your side that you did not fulfill. So furthermore, they talked about, look, the poor people are excluded in this very circumstance because they can't buy. First of all, we think that in order to help the poor, we have to have money, because in order to help, for example, the people in the slums that they talked about, you have to pay money to the people who go to the slums because they're working. You have to give shelter to those people. All those things are only possible if you have money. So therefore, if you want to actually help the poor, tangibly help the poor, instead of vaguely help the poor by not excluding them, which is not actually occurring, you need to have hard, cold cash, and that's only achieved in our paradigm because donations are not sufficient to give shelter to every single person in the slums. We need a lot more money. We think that's more beneficial on our side of the house. But furthermore, they talked about, look, the poor and the rich are going to have a disparity. The problem with this is that they don't recognize that the only way of becoming closer to God is not just paying money. Because now these poor are able to compete with the rich and become closer to the rich in this religious paradigm, because now they're able to make effort, and they're able to, for example, go to church every day, and that becomes equivalent to maybe the tens of thousands of dollars that those rich people spend. That means that now the gap between the rich and the poor is actually uniquely becomes narrower in our paradigm. Furthermore, they talked about, look, it's bad to the people who are really trying hard. We don't think that that's true, because the existence of casual believers actually contrasts the people who try really hard, the people who go to church every day. That means that now the people who go to church every day, who make a lot of effort, are valued all the more because they are totally contrast to the people who are casually opting in. We think that's more beneficial to those people they are talking about. So the conclusion of this argument is there's really no hierarchy of values. We don't see the reason this sort of values actually crowd out the other values like abstinence, which are more core to religion. But furthermore, there's no really harm to the poor that they're talking about, because those poor are more included in our paradigm. Second class, is it beneficial for the people who buy? Because they told us, look, it's a social pressure that's surrounding these people. The problem with this is that religion is something that is uniquely related to social pressure, because it's something that has people play into a single social narrative. It's something that has people play into a collective identity. That means that this social pressure thing is a unique part, because the fact that you're doing the same things as other people is the very value of religion on your side of the house. So we never understood why paying money in place of being able to be included in this community was a bad trade-off to begin with. We thought that was actually beneficial from the perspective of the people who were buying. But moreover, we never saw why that was the only sort of community that existed, because we already told you there are other communities that these people can participate in. We didn't see the existence of those on the first place. Furthermore, you talked about, look, if you teach us through education, that's enough. But the problem is, just learning through education, just reading the textbooks, isn't really enough, because you actually need to talk with the people, for example, for the religion. You actually need to go to those holy places to be able to actually experience for yourself what religion is like. And that's uniquely achieved when we allow people to pay for these holy experiences, when we allow people to trade money with this sort of religious experience, which is extremely crucial to them. And now they're going to be able to know what religion is actually like by meeting the people, by seeing the holy places. They're only going to be able to share this collective identity to a certain extent. They're going to be able to rethink their lives, and that's extremely beneficial. Finally, the net outcome. Because we think that the people who are going to be able to opt in as a unique, because of this unique trait that allows people to trade money with this religious salvation, increases the overall salvation in the world. So even if they exclude to a certain extent, we still think that's beneficial from a net perspective, and that's why this notion falls.
Remarks. Now I call upon the prize speaker from opposition side.
Mr. Speaker, firstly I'm going to I'll look at whether or not this is coercive. The second I'm going to talk about the difference between this and donation. And thirdly I'm going to talk about whether which paradigm can be achieve the mission of religion. First look at the idea of the capitalization. I think their capitalization is so outdated, as if they are in the Middle Ages, when the priest is regarded as the second highest standpoint in the society, below the king. And I couldn't understand why they have so much power that they can force poor people to pay money, which is to the extent which is out of the affordable prices. I'm not sure that the characterization is we continuously say the characterization is unrealistic, and if we concede to some extent that if the situation is that the majority poor cannot afford to certain amount of the king cross, then that we don't think this is coercive, because we say it's one of the legitimate ways for the churches to offer people a contribution to the religion. Because the difference between rich and poor in terms of the degree of belief is if the king's the gold cross is so expensive that then the majority of poor people cannot buy that sort of thing, so that the difference in terms of believing is not so big compared among the believers, because that majority of people cannot afford it. And we think that the way of capitalization is not problematic, because it's only one way, and it's only one way to contribute to church and feel religious experiences for those who are rich but who have not enough time to go to the churches or do religious initiation. And actually, rather we say, and at the same time, we say if poor do volunteer activities such as cleaning that which rich people won't do because they can afford pay money, then the poor people can more sophisticated, more valuable experiences that can feel more contribution because they do the necessary things which other rich people won't do. And so in concerning this point that we don't think this capitalization is coercive, rather it's one way to contribute to religion. And secondly, I'm going to talk about donation. They say that donation is different from capitalization by using the rhetoric. I like that rhetoric, but consider that seriously, there's no difference between them. And why it's bad for churches to give people approachable religious experiences in return by the payments? I'm not sure. And so their stance is so inconsistent. And sadly, I'm going to talk about the purpose of religion. In our paradigm, we can welcome diverse people from poor to rich, from rich who has time to rich who has no time. And more people can feel religious feelings and a more range of people can feel religious experiences, and more range of people can approach to religion. And so because of this, more people can be saved in terms of prayer, can feel religious belief. So we oppose this motion.
Max, now I call upon that speaker from Gamet's side to conclude this debate. Be here.
Religion itself has become a fashion now. It's not about believing, but it's also about showing that belief, and that's something we think is problematic. It's not only about you internalizing religion, but it's also about you externalizing it and showing to other people that you believe in that certain religion, and that's the problem that we see from our side of the house. If we're talking about tourists, then they're just buying it for decoration because it looks nice, right? If we're talking about believers, and that's the debate, I think they're buying it to show that they're different from other believers, to show that they're more hardcore root believer in comparison to the other side. And that's the comparison that needs to be recognized, and that's the problem that we see from our side of the house, because that's the mechanism how the poor people or the people with lesser financial capacity are excluded within society. Even if it's not explicitly written in the Bible itself, we told you how it's at the end of the day about perception, how these people feel when they look at other people wearing all these bling bling and flashy stuff, right? They feel that they're not as important as them, or they're not doing as much as the other believers, and that's something that harms them on that basis regarding the connection they have with God itself. We told you that the problem itself is the financial capital now then becomes prerequisite to show how much faith you have within faith, and to show to other people how much connection you have with God, right? We can also bring the example of like silver rings, how it went on to represent abstinence, and how that became a trend. The only people who actually were wearing it were the rich people, and obviously the people who wore it looked to be more like connected to God rather than those who did not wear it. And that's a problem that exists, because those people who could not even afford it had to like sit there thinking, even though I believe as much as the others, or even though I may believe even more so than those who wear it, it's not being recognized in society, and that's the thing that we see as being problematic. The only response came very late on in Kurida's speech when he said, well, you have anti-capitalist narrative exists, and you have very different narratives. But we told you, why would anyone believe it if you have the church itself, going capitalistic? Then he said, but you have many churches, right? It was something he tried to defend, but still, even if you have small churches going against capitalism, the moment you have a mega church going for capitalism, it doesn't really help their narrative at all. It doesn't really help the narrative going against capitalism itself. The only real refute that they had, or the real problem they had with our case, is the problem of donation, which they hadn't really dealt with, right? We told you right from the very beginning, very clearly, that capitalistic system is about perception and how these people feel the need to buy it in order to showcase their faith. But we told you how it's different in donations, because no one needs to donate. They don't feel the need to donate, but they do so because they personally want to. We told you how that's completely different. But putting that aside, right? The problem we have with their case is they haven't really told us why money in itself can be a legitimate criteria to value faith in itself. The only example we have is it helps people like Komatsu because he needs it. But even if you have that example, it's not necessarily justifying why money itself can be a reason. We told you on our side of the house what the uniqueness of religion itself, and we were the only ones that actually went on to talk about this, how money is not necessary, how comfort goes to you equally regardless of how much money you have, and by having capitalism, how it's rather placing a price tag, and you're saying you're now branding a certain person's faith by saying it's only worth an X amount, and we told you why that's bad. But even if we were to put all that aside, and even if capitalism in itself is consistent in terms of spreading itself, taking their best case scenario, the first question is it necessary though? We told you why it's not necessary, or why it rather causes all the harms. And secondly, is it worth the trade-off itself? Even if taking, the absolute best scenario, is it worth the trade-off of degrading faith, of degrading religion itself, of degrading the poor people and excluding them? Is it worth it? The framing that needs to be recognized came at the very start of my speech in the PM when I said the church is more accountable to its own believers before they are to potential new believers. So at the end of the day, even if you were to buy everything they said, they still don't win the debate, and therefore we win this round.
Thank you very much. All speeches over, shake hands,